Another girl has been gang raped in Israel, this time a 16-year-old girl by, according to initial reports, of up to 30 men. This incident triggered outrage in Israel and is making headline news across the globe. Thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest the incident. They were there to also demonstrate against what they call a culture of gang rape. They believe that Israel's alleged gang rape culture is allowed and accepted by a lawless system.
7 more suspects were arrested in connection with the alleged gang rape of a 16-year-old girl at a hotel in Eilat. Police have now arrested 11 suspects in this horrific case that shook the country.
Israel is accused of not addressing an epidemic of gang rape committed by Israelis inside Israel and outside Israel. Due to social norms and questioning by police, Israelis believe that they cannot ask for help. In fact, only 17% of the culprits were ever prosecuted. This is because many of them find loopholes in the system and eventually get away. An Israeli teenager was gang raped during a visit to the southern resort city of Eilat. At least 30 men joined in the attack, shocking the nation and making international headlines. Israel has been through repeated rounds of cases of sexual assault in recent years, but the August 12th attack quickly overtook the national conversation. The sheer number of men involved ignited a storm of outrage. Observers have pointed out that in Israel, gang rape is a manifestation of an Israeli culture. According to the Haas-Tikiriet Israeli women's rights group, cited by the French news outlet AFP, 1 in 5 Israeli women was raped during her lifetime. At least 260 cases reported every day, according to the Israeli organization. According to Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel, sexual assault cases are on the rise in Israel in general. The Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel says the number of complaints to the police climbing 15% from 2013 to 2018. This while the number of calls to the group's hotlines up 40% in the period. At least 55% of the association's hotlines have come from teenagers. The numbers may be far higher because the problem is almost never addressed. A total of 6,220 sexual felony cases were reported by the police in 2018, while ARCCI was informed of 12,077 cases. This shows inconsistencies between authorities and social organizations on the frequency of rape cases in Israel. Rape in Israel is on the rise. The number of rapes reported to the police in 2018 rose 12% from the previous year, according to ARCCI. About 10% of rapes in Israel are perpetrated by people the victim does not know. The Eilat attack shines a spotlight on all sexual violence against women in Israel.
I think that the last case that happened in Eilat, it wasn't necessarily the hardest story or the worst stories. I think it was just like, it brought people to the edge because it was like enough, another time that it happened, another story that happened, another rape that happens. Just women are fed up and they just said enough, so most of us just took it to the street. There was a lot of anger on the street, a lot of protest on the street, and very vocal protest on the internet and the Facebook and stuff. Just people said enough is enough, no more. I think that we are living in a patriarchal world everywhere. I mean, it's not just in Israel, it's all over the world. But in Israel, what adds to patriarchy is also the fact that we are living in a very militarized society, which means men are used to get whatever they want. They used to use force in order to get whatever they want, and it could be in all kinds of layers of life, not just with relationship with women or in the sexual area. We live in a society that usually in case of sexual harassment or abuse, they are blaming the victims. Usually if you come forward and you are complaining about sexual abuse that you have been gone through, people usually will start to ask you, what were you wearing? Were you drinking? Is it your fault? Is it not your fault? So it's bad enough to have the situation itself, the sexual abuse, to go through, because it's a compromise every layer of life, every feeling that you have of feeling free, feeling safe, and so on. And on top of it, to add the fact that everybody around you, or most everybody around you, questioning you about, blaming you, and thinking that it's your fault, or sometimes just very much downtone it, like, it's not a big deal, why are you not smiling, it's not an issue and stuff. So all of it together actually brings a lot that most of the women will just not complain, and for the most of their life, for the rest of their life, there will be silence about it, they will not talk about it, a lot of time not even for their friends or their families or the people that are close to them.
אז שלום לך גברתי, קודם כל בואו נכיר אותך, מאיפה את ומה את עושה בחיים.
שלום, אני טלי, אני מורה ומחנכת בתיכון בכרמיאל. גרה בהררית.
מה חושבת על הילדה בת ה-16 שנאנסה בכנופיה באילת, ולמה את חושבת?
אני חושבת שלצערי כל שנה, בעיקר בתקופת הקיץ, אנחנו נתקלים באיזה מקרה כזה באמת מזעזע. וזה כנראה רק המקרה היחיד או הבודד שמגיע לתקשורת. התופעה הזאת היא כנראה הרבה יותר רחבה וקורית בהרבה יותר מקומות. קודם כל, כמובן שליבי עם הנערה, ואני מקווה שהיא תמצא את הדרך להשתקם. ואני מקווה בעיקר שגם החברה הישראלית תמצא דרכים להשתקם, לעשות איזה תיקון בתופעה הזאת, בתרבות הזאת.
אז את מרגישה פתוחה כאישה בישראל, או שאת חושבת שנשים פתוחות נגיד, ולמה?
כן. אני חושבת שלנשים בישראל קשה להרגיש היום בטוחות, כי קודם כל התופעות של אלימות מינית, הן קורות הרבה פעמים בקרב משפחה ובתוך סיטואציות חברתיות מוכרות. זה לא רק האישה שהולכת בסמטה חשוכה. וזאת החלטה מאוד עמוקה של החברה הישראלית על כל המערכות שלה לטפל בסיפור הזה, גם במערכת החינוך ובמערכת האכיפה ובמערכת המשפט והענישה. ואם לא הכל יהיה אחוד באיזשהו אופן, אז אין דרך לעשות תיקון עמוק לתופעה הזאת.
מה דעתך על הילדה בת 16 שנאנסה בכנופיה באילת?
לפני שאני אתן דעתי על הילדה, אני רוצה לתת דעתי על האונסים. זה מעשה זוועתי, חמור במינו, וממש, מה אני אגיד לך, מכעיס מאוד. סך הכל, אם אנחנו מדברים על ילדה, מדובר בילדה חסרת ישע, חסרת אונים, ילדה קטינה, שהיא קורבן. היא קורבן של גברים במקרה הזה.
More on this topic from social media. Vivian says, disgusting. My thoughts go out to all those women. That poor girl. My thoughts also turn to the young British girl in Cyprus who reported being raped by a group of young Israeli boys. They all walked free. Alexander replies, yes, having seen the widely circulated videos of the incident, it is clear that she was drugged. Unfortunately, Israel gets what it wants. The Cypriot police initially arrested all the Israeli men. However, Israel then sends a team of experts. Dasha says, the rape case is unimaginable. I think the hotel employee was aware of the incident. The responsibility of the hotel is serious. Can men in that country not judge good and bad? Very scary people. Jay says, no wonder Hollywood is such a cesspool, and with the likes of Epstein.
The issue of sexual violence in Israel is part of culture that exists in most countries of the world. Israel is also suffer from that. Sexual violence begins in early childhood and continue through adolescence. If you see children that in so many years exposed to many messages that are often confusing about the idea about what is supposed to be sex in women. For example, woman presented as a sexual object and as a product time and time again.
Thousands of Israelis demonstrated and observed a symbolic work stoppage to denounce sexual violence against women. This came following the gang rape of a 16-year-old girl in a Red Sea resort of Eilat. At least 30 organizations and companies, including municipalities and businesses such as Microsoft Israel, took part in the vigil. According to the protesters and activists, sexual violence in Israel is not a priority for this regime, and it hasn't been in any Israeli cabinet since 1948. Activists also want to see changes in the legal system. In 2018, only 17% of all sexual felony cases were prosecuted, according to ARCCI. In most gang rapes in Israel, the perpetrators are teenagers. Some 63% of group felony rape involves males ages 12 through 18, while 37% are committed by adults over 18. Activists believe that there needs to be a specific court that specializes in sexual felonies, like there is an economic and labor court. Now, activists are pushing for legislation regarding sexual assault and extend the statute of limitations in some cases. Israel doesn't have a legal system that effectively addresses sexual assault.
Even when they get the courage and they want to complain, let's go and go to the police, what they are going through in the police station for most of the time, not all the time, but for most of the time, it's so hard. The interrogation is so hard. A lot of times the cops themselves maybe not believe in them or whatever, or they have to rethink all over again and again what happened to them. And after that, even if they pass the police, and let's say the police agreeing with them and believe in them, and the police is giving her a recommendation to put this man into trial, so in most of cases it will never get to trial, and it will never end in punishment to the person who did it, to the rapist. So she thinks from the beginning, why should I complain? Why should I go forward with my stories? Because at the end, all this misery that I have to go through all the way, and nothing will come out of it. Absolutely. I think part of the problem is that the authority doesn't do enough. There are not enough education programs. I mean, it's all about education. The bottom line is education. Like, if you start educating the little children from kindergarten age, what is respect? How do you respect each other? How to respect the other one borders or the other one space? Then we will not have to get to a situation that when they grow up, they are abusing and attacking. Men are also women are also women, because men are also being attacked. Okay, so if we have more education program, if we have more budget on education, it will be easier. If the policemen who are sitting in the station and a woman is coming to complain will be more trained to how to do the investigation, will lose their prejudice, lose their chauvinist idea, it will be much easier for the woman to complain. And of course, after that, if we go to court, it says that either it's not a very serious, we don't see it as a very serious problem that we need to address. It also says that they're like the mirror of the society that we are living in. I mean, those prosecutors who decided not to prosecute this case because it's not serious enough, it's not big enough, she didn't complain, she didn't say anything, she wore this and this, okay? They are the mirror of what all society thinks about sexual victims, sexual abuse victims, okay? So it's like, it's not surprising that there are so few cases that actually get to court and actually get also a punishment at the end.
איך הרשויות צריכות לעשות יותר כדי להגן על נשים מפני התבוללות מינית ולמה?
כן, ברור. זאת עבודה מערכתית. זו טעות תהיה לחשוב שהנערים האלה הם פשוט חבורה של עבריינים. הנערים האלה גדלים בתוך אקלים מסוים שבו מותר לדבר באופן מסוים, להתנהג באופן מסוים. מערכת החינוך בקושי נוגעת בדבר הזה בצורה ממוסדת ועמוקה. וגם אנחנו רואים שבסופו של דבר גם עונשים וגם האופן שבו מטפלים וגם האופן שבו נאנסות עד שהן מעזות להתלונן, איזה יחס הן מקבלות ואיזה מדורי גיהנום הן עוברות. אז בוודאי זה דורש איזושהי התכווננות מאוד מאוד רחבה של כלל הרשויות בשביל להחליט שזה פשוט תופעה של אין לה מקום בחברה הישראלית.
מדוע מותר שתקרה התבוללות מינית ומדוע גברים ובנים מסוימים יוצאים מזה?
קודם כל אסור שתקרה. אסור בשום פנים ואופן. אני חושבת שאחד הדברים המאוד יסודיים זה קודם כל להחליט שזאת בעיה של כל החברה, זאת בעיה של נשים וזאת בעיה של גברים. זה לא מלחמה בין נשים לגברים, זאת מלחמה בין אנשים שרוצים חברה טובה ומתוקנת לבין אנשים שנוהגים באלימות. וכל עוד השאלות על אלימות מינית לא יישאלו גם על גברים ומה הם רוצים לתקן ואיך הם רואים את המקום שלהם, אז זה ייראה כאילו איפשהו זה אולי מותר, או שיש צד אחד נפגע וצד אחד שהוא תוקף, אבל האמת היא שזאת באמת בעיה עמוקה, עמוקה, עמוקה של כולנו.
מדוע מותר להתעללות מינית לקרות, ומדוע ישנם גברים ונערים הנמצאים בכך?
כל מה שדיברתי עליו, עם סיבות שיכולות באמת להתיר, בסוגריים, את האונס לגבי גברים לנערות. ואני חושבת חסר בכל הממסד, בכל ממסדי העולם, אולי במקומות אחרים יותר ואולי במקומות אחרים פחות, כל העניין של החינוך מילדות לעניין של שוויוניות בין המינים. כל העניין של חינוך מיני בבתי ספר. אם היו מכניסים את כל הנושא של חינוך מיני בבתי ספר והיו עובדים על הילדים מילדותם, איך לשלוט ביצר המיני שלהם, לבחורה איך להיות חזקה, איך לדעת את הזכויות שלה כאישה.
More on this topic from social media. Speaketh says, where were these people when Israeli men raped a British woman in Cyprus? Mohammed says, it is not the first time either. Last time around, the girl was the one who got arrested for reporting a similar incident. According to Oscar, it happened again, no surprise. Here come the divergent experts and lawyers. 16-year-old raped by 30 men, watch them get slapped on the wrist, and that's it. Mark says, disgusting, sad, and a national tragedy. The blame should also be squarely on the leaders of this otherwise wonderful entity who incite violence, lawlessness, and lies. It would be very interesting to see the real Israel violent crime statistics for 2020 to date. Kwanili says, sexual violence always points to something fundamentally wrong in that society.
I think this is because that case was very hard to ignore. If you see a lot of rape with lower media profile happen every day. In order to change the reality that happened in Israel, the legal system must to change. And when I say change, I mean we have to encourage the victim to go to the police station and complain about what's happened to them. Because in the reality, only small number of sexual assault cases really became to police station, and from that number, that's already small, we have only very small number. I think something like 20%. From that became to real cases, like criminal cases that come to court.
Last year, a dozen Israeli teenagers were arrested in Cyprus after a 19-year-old British woman said they had raped her in a resort hotel there. But after an outpouring of concerns about victim shaming and the pressures in Israeli society to prove one's manliness, the Israeli teenagers all wound up freed, and the woman was arrested on charges of making a false accusation. The 19-year-old said she was forced to change her account under duress by Cypriot police after hours of questioning alone without legal representation. She said she was really fearing for her life and believed signing the statement was the only way to get home. Just a few days ago, an Israeli was arrested after raping a 17-year-old boy in occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds. Just a week ago, another man in Israel was sentenced to 17 years behind bars for raping a young girl. Here is the news making the press in Israel. The Times of Israel. 1/4 of Jewish Israelis and more than 1/3 of Jews who voted for Benjamin Netanyahu believe the coronavirus was sent by God as a punishment or to send a message, according to an annual survey. The survey, put out by Hidush, which advocates for religious freedom and pluralism in Israel, also found that 70% of Israelis reject the notion that criticism of Haredi or ultra-Orthodox conduct during the pandemic stems from bigotry, as opposed to how Haredi communities believe. Ynet News, head of Israel Chamber of Independent Organizations, warns that while in normal year 40,000 to 50,000 businesses close, that number could double in 2020. The economic situation is as serious as the health situation, says Roy Cohen, president of Lahav, the Israel Chamber of Independent Organizations and Businesses. He says that the psychological impact poses greatest risk to economy. The Jerusalem Post. A report by the Hidush nonprofit organization shows that only 8% of Israelis said they trusted the regime. This while 4% said they trusted the Knesset or parliament. In terms of trust in regime institutions, a plurality of 36% said they trust the Supreme Court, while 11% expressed the same view in the chief rabbinate. Globes. The most significant economic aspect of normalization with Bahrain is perhaps that it is a bridge to Saudi Arabia. There is the physical bridge that connects the island to Saudi Arabia, but more important is the economic bridge. Bahrain is connected to the Saudi economy even more than the UAE is, and through it, it will be possible to do business with Saudi companies.